first in a long time of our Lunch and Learn series. We started immediately after COVID began in 2020. We had more than 30 talks by a variety of speakers from all over the world, including Brazil and Israel. And now we're welcoming Rabbi Zilbershtein, and Adam Gilman will give her more of an introduction.
Great. Thanks so much, Keith. Great to be with all of you today. I do want to preface, I'm in the middle of class, so I have to go back, but I'm pleased and very glad to introduce my dear friend, Rabbi, teacher, comrade, Rabbi Alisa Zilbershtein, who's currently an assistant rabbi at Beth Tikva congregation in Toronto. Last year, she graduated from JTS and also has an MA in Jewish civilizations from Hochschule für Jüdischen Studien in Heidelberg, Germany. Before coming to North America, Tzipi lived in Kiev with her partner Shmulik, where she taught history of Jewish philosophy at the National University of Kiev Molcha Academy. In addition to speaking Ukrainian and Russian, she also speaks Chinese, Hebrew, and I think a little bit of Korean, if I'm not mistaken. And a big part of her role now and in who she is a lot of pastoral care, teaching, chassidut, brief counseling, all those things. But in our capacity today, Rabbi Zilbershtein is going to be talking about the current realities of Jewish life and life in general in Ukraine, and a lot of the important, holy, and necessary work that she was doing right from the start, literally saving lives and really being an inspiration to many people and putting the Torah of now and that difficult Torah of the world in front of us, helping us struggle and make sense and meaning of our world. So I'm very happy to introduce and have my dear friend, Rabbi Tzipi, to be with her today.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Adam. I'm very happy to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time since we saw each other last time in New York. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I am really grateful for having a chance to talk about Ukraine and the Jewish community in Ukraine and the work that we're doing and ways to help and all of that. I'm really thrilled and I'm very excited to meet you and to talk to you about what's going on. Though it's a difficult subject, I need to warn you, there will be sad things, unfortunately, because it's war. But I hope that, as Adam said, there will be something of inspiration coming from that too. And let me just begin. There's a little bit brief history of Jewish community in Ukraine, because that's a question that I get asked a lot. And I'll start with that. And I'll speak for maybe 20 minutes or so, and then we'll have time for questions and discussion and all of that. Right? Does that sound good? Okay, awesome. So the Jewish community in Ukraine, it's very old. It is about 1,000 years old. And my favorite trivia fact is that the first document that mentions Kiev as a city is a Jewish document. It's a Jewish letter. It is called Kiev letter, and it was written sometime in the 10th century of Common Era. And this letter, it was actually found in Cairo Geniza in Egypt. And this is the first document that mentions the city of Kiev. And the document says, it's actually, as I said, it's a Jewish document, and it says something like, we have our, another Jew who has been put into prison or like into jail for probably for some kind of debt, some monetary issues. And we're collecting money, donations to release him. And this letter, and it starts as like, we are Jews of Kiev, and so on and so forth. And this letter traveled all the way from Kiev to Cairo, to Egypt, and this is where it landed, and this is where it was found. So people who were collecting money, they were probably traveling with this letter and they were collecting donations. So it's a very ancient, not as ancient as Israel, but a pretty old community there. So Jews lived there for many, many centuries. And of course, as you know, all history, there were better times, there were worse times, there were peaceful times and not so peaceful times. So I get asked a lot, like, what's the Jewish community today? Are there any Jews in Ukraine? And I can tell you 100%, there are a lot of Jews in Ukraine, and even today. And the Jews who live in Ukraine, they are the Jews who, descendants of the Jews who lived there. There is a kind of very widespread understanding, especially in North America, that kind of like all Jews of Ukraine perished in Holocaust. That's not actually true, though, of course, millions of people died. And, you know, what can I say? It's a terrible tragedy for all of us, but that doesn't mean that everyone died. About 1 million Jews were evacuated from Ukraine when Nazi Germany attacked the country in 1941. And actually, it was the first territory that was attacked by Nazi Germany in June 22nd of 1949. The city of Kiev was bombed. That was the first city that got attacked. So we need to remember and keep it in mind that Ukraine was not a collaborating country with Nazi Germany. It was a part of Soviet Union who fought Nazi Germany. That's why it's unfair to say that, you know, it's an anti-Semitic country, or that it was like everyone was hostile to Jews, or that everyone killed Jews. A lot of people were rescued. Of course, it wasn't possible to rescue all of them or majority of them, because the attack from Nazi Germany was unexpected. Like, it was a complete surprise. No one was prepared for that. But then as the war unraveled, the Second World War, about 1 million of Jews were evacuated to Middle Eastern countries, Central Asian countries, such as Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and they were saved, and then they came back to Kiev. So, for example, my partner Victor, or as Adam called him, Shmulik, his family lived in Kiev for like hundreds of years, and they lived there through the Second World War, and they still continue to live there. So they're there right now. They're in Kiev. I was myself born in Russia, and my parents are in Russia, but my partner's parents are in Kiev. And this is just like an example of the fact that there are Jews there. There are Jewish communities. They're very vibrant, and they were very vibrant before the war. Of course, now a lot of them got, how would you say, it's the kind of scattered, right? But still, some of them are still continue to exist and to work and to help people who stayed in Ukraine. So in my city where I lived, in Kiev, there are, in the like nearest proximity from where I lived, there were 5 Jewish communities, and they're Jewish communities of all denominations. There are much more in the entire city, but like I lived in a Jewish neighborhood. There is like a Jewish neighborhood in Kiev with everything that you need to have a Jewish life, with a kosher shop, with restaurant, with synagogues, with mikveh, and everything that you need, right? So the communities that we had, obviously, I was a member of conservative community, or Masorti community, as we call it. Our Rabbi Stamov, is a graduate of Shechter as well, and he studied in Israel. And yeah, it was a traditional conservative community. It still exists, but our rabbi and his family, they got evacuated to Israel. So it exists, but like not in the same form. He does come to visit sometimes, but it's difficult, and it's not really safe in Kiev. We also obviously had a number of Chabad communities. Chabad is very strong in Ukraine and in the former Soviet Union in general. It's the strongest Jewish movement there. We had obviously Orthodox Litvak style congregation. We have Reform congregation. We have secret Kabbalah congregation. We have a secular Jewish congregation, for like Jews who don't really want to do anything with religion, but they still want to come together and do fun stuff. We had a Jewish community for people who, in the beginning of the war, I mean, in 2014, left the territories that were occupied by Russia back then. That is the territory of Donetsk Oblast, Donetsk region, and Lugansk region, and they had their own closed community only for the people from that part of the country. So they had their own small community there. So as I'm saying, there is a variety of communities, and we really had a happy life there. We did not face any problems with being Jews. And again, I know that there is a stereotype of thinking about Ukraine as an anti-Semitic country. Not really know why. I don't really know why it is like that, as I said, especially in North America. But in the history of Ukraine, of modern Ukraine, which is from 1991, which is like 30 years, right? It's a relatively modern new state after the collapse of Soviet Union, when Ukraine became an independent country. I can tell you we had 0 cases of either shooting or the synagogue or attack of the synagogue or anything, and no violence. Never happened in Ukraine. And another big sign, of course, is that the president of Ukraine is Jewish. And I think it's pretty unique for the world. The only other Jewish president that we know is in Israel. So you can understand that if people chose him, it means that they're not that anti-Semitic as you might imagine, or some of you might imagine. And President Zelensky is openly Jewish. Everyone knows that he is Jewish. And I would say it's pretty hard for me to imagine, even for United States, let's say, to have a Jewish president. I don't know when that's going to happen. It's hard to predict, but it did happen in Ukraine, and he's an amazing leader, and he has a lot of support from the country, from the people of Ukraine. And he's a role model for many of us, and especially for Jews who are engaged in volunteer work. Jews who are helping civilians, Jews who are helping army, Jews who are, helping hospitals, all of that. I think for many of us, his leadership is important because he's also a very charismatic person, and he talks to the people every day. Every day he makes a video when he talks about what happened during this day, what are the plans, what's going to happen. And he really supports people emotionally. I think I like to watch those videos quite often, especially when I get sad or I get tired, because it's uplifting. And for me, that's important that he is Jew. I find inspiration in that. So that is to say that we were doing pretty well before the war. Now it's much more complicated. As I said, a lot of people left. Not everyone, especially we need to keep in mind that men from the age of 18 to 60 are not allowed to leave the country because they're in the age that they can be potentially drafted into the army. So they're not allowed. They cannot cross the border. So all of the men stayed. Only men who have, let's say, Israeli citizenship, they could leave. For example, our Rabbi Stamov, he has Israeli citizenship. That's why he moved to Israel. But the rest of the people who don't have a second citizenship, they had to stay in the country. So all of those people stayed. There are rabbis who stayed as well. For example, Rabbi Reuven Assman, who is a Chabad rabbi, he's doing a lot of volunteer work, and he's very, very supportive, and he goes to Israel and he advocates for Ukraine in Israel, and he's doing a very important and great job. And so Jewish communities still function there. A lot of the members of my community, they were relocated to the cities that is called Chernovitz. And some of you maybe know it. It used to be a very Jewish city, and it's now a very Jewish city again, once again in the history. There was a big Jewish community there, in the beginning of 20th century, and they got relocated there because it's a safe territory. It's a territory that never got bombed, like till today. It's close to Moldova. It's like on the southern border of Ukraine, and so they live there right now. And I can tell you that we have a Torah class every week, and we come together with those people who are in Chernovtsi from our community and from some other cities as well. and we study Torah together. And they also have a synagogue there, and we, pray and do everything, celebrate holidays, all of that. Celebrate all of the Jewish holidays in the midst of the war. So these communities, they continue to exist. And of course, they need support. But I can say that they're doing pretty well because there are a lot of Jewish organizations that are helping them. And Jewish organizations also helped a lot, especially in the beginning with evacuation. And that's why a lot of people got evacuated either to Europe or to Israel. I am not going to talk much about Israel right now because it's a little bit a complicated subject, and the Israel politics and why, to which capacity Israel supports Ukraine and for what reasons they're happening. I'm sure that you know about that yourself. There are some problems with, let's say, Ukrainian refugees, whether they're accepted in Israel or not. Not everyone is accepted. And the reason for that is that not everyone has sufficient Jewish documents, because, again, this is something to think about, the question of, like, if there's a war in your country and you run away and, like, you didn't have time even to pack your stuff, and you have, like, a little bag with, the most necessary things, and you come to the border with Israel, how are you going to prove that you're a Jew? Like, what kind of documents can you show? What would be your proof? Just a mental kind of experiment for all of you to think about that. What would you bring to prove that you're a Jew? Remember that since it's a former Soviet Union, none of us have, like, ketubas of parents. We don't, like, our parents were not married in, in halacha or in synagogue or anything like that. So we don't have that. The people of my age, we also don't have any documents that would state our nationality or ethnicity. And even if people, the previous generation, not necessarily their ethnicity in their documents was stated as Jews, because they were hiding that. Because in the Soviet Union, there were certain limitations to Jews, right? And so people would change their names, they would hide this information, they didn't want necessarily to be in the document. So how are you going to prove that you're a Jew? So people who come to Israel, they often face this kind of problems of proving their Jewishness. They quite often, they're actually being deported or not allowed to stay. But that's all I'm going to say. A lot of Jews were accepted as well. So it's good and bad. There's a good part of it and a bad part of it. Those who were accepted to Israel, they get a tremendous support. They have a financial support, they've been taken care of. Those who had problems with that, they had more difficult time. But they went to some other countries. Europe accepted a lot of refugees. We would say that for today, it's about 14 million refugees that came from Ukraine. It's a lot of people. Most of them are in European countries at the moment. So about my kind of a personal story and what I'm doing with that. Today is 287th day of the war, and I started my work, my volunteer work, everything that I do since the beginning of the war, since the day one. And I can tell you, I have a special calendar where I mark every day, so I don't lose track. And it's also a good way of reminder that the war continues, to count every day. That's why I know exactly which day it is. And it's been rough. 287 days. When it comes to this kind of dates, they kind of lose meaning. I remember when it was like 1 week of the war, when it was like first months of the war, second month, 3 months of the war. But then when it gets like to 200 and something days, it's like mind cannot process this anymore in the same sense. But it's almost a year. So the war began the full-scale war began on February 24th. So now it's December 7th. So it's like in 2 months, it's going to be a whole year of war. And it's a war. It's every day. Every day there is a lot of pain and there is a lot of suffering. There is a lot of gratitude as well. Because an ability to help someone really saves a lot of us who are abroad. For example, me and my partner, we were in New York when the full-scale war broke out. And we, of course, made a decision not to go back to Ukraine. My original plan was to go back to Ukraine and to Kiev and to work there as a rabbi. And we decided we cannot do that because if my partner goes there, he won't be able to leave the country because, again, he'll be in this age of men who are potentially can be drafted to the army. There is, by the way, no like general drafting right now. It's not like every man has to go to army. That's not happening. It's only volunteers or like specially trained people. But in occasion that he will need to be drafted, he would be, and that's why we decided not to go, and we relocated to Canada. And being so far away from home and from relatives and from friends, it's very, very difficult. But an ability to help, it really changes everything. So what I did in all these months and every day of the war is that I really invested in keeping connections with people. And this is a time when I realized the strengths, amazing solidarity, and beauty of Jewish community. And that's a part of a gratefulness that I'm so grateful that I'm a Jew. I cannot tell you. Because I have so many friends all over the world, and they're all amazing people, and they're all working very, very hard to help people in Ukraine, despite the past history, despite the contradictions or painful memories. So many Jews came together to help people in Ukraine. And when the war began, the first thing that I did, I reached out to as many people as I can. And obviously, as I'm a Jewish activist, I know other Jewish activists, and we connected really fast, and we started to really work together. Even being far away, we can still do a lot. We began doing a lot of evacuation and rescue operations, and that included finding transport for people who were blocked in their cities, paying for the transport, finding a safe passage for them to cross the border, finding for them an accommodation in Europe where they can stay. And that was done with like a tremendous amount of people were working on that at the same time. And we needed to do it very, very fast, because we get a message from a woman, and she's in her 80s, and she's in a city that is being like shelled, and she was, she kind of got stuck in her building where she, I think, was on the 5th floor, if I'm not mistaken, no. And she couldn't get down from there, and no one could get to her because it was like constantly shelled. And it was a whole rescue operation with a lot of people involved of like how to save her and how to bring her out. There was a Jewish woman. There were actually 2 women, a mother and a daughter. And the daughter was like in her 50s. And they got rescued, and that gives a lot of hope when there are little victories like that. And I'm not going to tell you all of the story. There are many, many, many other people who got help in this way, and we found a transport for them. And finding transport is quite interesting. So I would get a message like, there is this person in this city who is looking for transport. So I messaged another person who is a man from Turkey, and he used to live in Ukraine, and he's very good with communication, and he would find a driver who would go to that city and bring this person in their car to a safe place, and then from there we would find a bus or something like that, or a train, and they would go to the border and cross the border. So, and I'm in one country, he's in another country, this person is in Ukraine, and we were still able to find the safe routes how to evacuate people. Also in that time, I used to collect quite a lot of donations from various Jewish communities who were very, very welcoming to me and very supportive, and we used this money to really to send to people directly. Especially I had a lot of single mothers with children, and we would send money to them so they can buy food, or they can buy tickets if they want to leave, or anything that they need to buy. There was a lot of direct help in the beginning, but the time kind of progressed. My kind of focus, it shifted from helping civilians to really helping army. And I got connected very much to Ukrainian army and to the soldiers that are fighting. They're in the front line. And that's what I'm doing till today. I have my volunteers connected directly to the army, and I spoke to them every day. Every day of my life, I speak to volunteers who are there, and we discuss what we need to do and how we can help. And a lot of that, again, involves a lot of money, of course, and finding money and all of that, because the thing that we need for army is first aid kits, tourniquets, all kinds of supplies, food even. But the most expensive things that we need are cars, and cars are very expensive, and they're very, very necessary to our army. And you might think that, well, it's army, it should be supported by government, and it is. They do get, you know, ammunition and tanks and, you know, all of that, but often they lack such thing as a car, so they need a car to evacuate wounded soldiers or dead soldiers to relocate, and they need to do it fast. And of course, cars get destroyed, and they also get bombed and shelled and all of that. So, and fixing the cars costs money, and so that's, we do a lot of those things too. Israel, again, if we're talking about Israel, I have amazing volunteers from Israel who would send us first aid. I'm on the Zoom. First aid kits and tourniquets and all of that for our soldiers. So they're volunteers in Israel who are also helping soldiers of Ukraine. There are Israeli citizens who are fighting on the side of Ukraine. There are Jews of Ukraine who are fighting on the south and the side of Ukraine. So this is kind of like a brief introduction. I just want to see if you have any questions at this point or comments, or should I just continue talking? Yes, Stephen?
Yes, how you doing? So the question that I do have is that this Friday night, as Adam may have told you, we're having our monthly Kabbalah Shabbat service and dinner. If we were, and we're highlighting the service with the theme of peace relating to Ukraine. My understanding is that the way in which people have been able to donate in the past was to do it through Airbnb and other tools like that, where in effect they would make reservations to use a place and then just never follow through on actually using it, but the money would be transferred. Is there a more preferable way that we can announce to our synagogue members that if they're looking to support the situation in Ukraine, how they can do that?
Yeah, there are many ways how to do that. There are a lot of organizations. I don't know. Airbnb was not a good idea to begin with. First of all, it's a question of safety. Like, if we bring refugees to, let's say, another country in Europe, we wouldn't want them to go somewhere like Airbnb, like, because human trafficking is a huge problem, as you can imagine, during the time of war because of the chaos, and people get actually kidnapped. So we don't do that anymore. And there are organizations that you can donate to. I will put one in the chat. And this is,
if you could send it to Adam,
I will send it to Adam.
That would be great, because that way we can perhaps make an announcement during the service.
Yeah. So it's called Mriya Aid. Mriya means a dream. In I will send it to Adam. I'll put it in the chat too.
Thank you so much.
It's a really great organization. I am collaborating with them, so they know me, I know them. I just started collaborating with them recently, by the way, because most of the things that I did was like very grassroots volunteers, just like people to people direct connection rather than an organization. But this is a very trustworthy organization, and they're doing a lot of amazing things and humanitarian things and all of that. As an example, I can give you, in my congregation in Das Tikva, we did a winter clothing drive because it's a huge problem right now. You know, there is no electricity often, there's no heat, it's very cold, and people like sitting in the darkness. It's absolutely terrifying. There is no water, like it's very hard. So people do need a lot of winter clothing. So when we did a drive here in our congregation, we had like a lot. a lot of things. I was so happy. People were so generous, and we had a lot of really good quality clothing. So this organization, Rabbi, they helped us to ship everything to Ukraine. And that's just one of the examples.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes.
In the same direction, Alisa, we will run this Kabbalat Shabbat this Friday. And we are adding a lot of prayers around the theme of peace. And would you recommend us to use a specific Jewish text as an inspiration for this Kabbalat Shabbat in which we want to be close to Ukraine?
I think of course it depends a lot on the mood of your event. I can give you an example. It's actually an interesting story. Before the high holidays, we read the Psalm 27 every day, right? And that psalm, it actually has the words that if the army is going to, I don't have it in English in front of me. So like, if there will be like soldiers around me, and my heart will not tremble, and if the war will happen, I will not be afraid, for God is with me. And that for me, that was a very meaningful prayer when I was in that season, and I was praying and reciting it with all my strengths and all my heart. And it's also a piece of maybe a pastoral care example. That's also, I do a lot of that too, because I talk to people all the time, and they're going through so many difficult, awful things in their lives. So I shared the song with my friend who's a volunteer, and I said, this is the text from the Bible that I like to read. And what he did, but he didn't tell me about that, but he and his children, they took a flag of Ukraine, and they wrote the text of the psalm on the flag, and they brought it to the front line, and they gave it to soldiers. And I'll show you a picture, because I just have it on my table here. You can't really see it very well, but a little bit. You see this is a flag, and there is the text written there, and there is like tank in behind. And this is like really the front line of the war. So that's like a meaningful psalm for me personally that I like to recite, because I think it's hopeful. But it's also about war rather than peace. You know what I mean? It's like, if war happens, what do I do? So that I'm not going to be afraid.
And it's happening, and it's important to face the reality. It's very, very, very tough. It's very difficult, and I think this is an opportunity to relate to what is happening there. And we want to be optimistic, but we don't want to detach ourselves from reality.
Absolutely. And I can say that a lot of prayers in our Siddur, they became very meaningful to me. I could not connect to them before in the same way, because these are prayers that are talking about, our Jewish history of persecutions and suffering. And there are a lot of prayers that are talking to God in this kind of a language, like help me, save me, rescue me, from the evildoers, from the enemies. And when there was peace, I kind of, I didn't really like those prayers. They didn't really mean anything to me. I couldn't really connect to them. Now I read them, I read them all, and they are all meaningful to me. And that's an example of the power of our tradition, that it prepares us for the hard times. And hard times, unfortunately, they come. We couldn't really imagine that this was going to happen. But when it happened, I have a whole book of the prayers that are really helpful for me. So I recommend to go through Siddur and see what prayers actually talk about it.
There were some specific prayers that were written for Ukraine. Is there any in particular that you like?
I don't really know any. I think there was one. I think I have a text of one of the prayers, specifically prayer for peace for Ukraine, that was written by another rabbi. I can share it with you after after that, I can send it to you if you want.
We've been using one. I can try to share it with you. Can you see it?
Yeah.
So this is the one we've been saying here.
Yeah, maybe it's the same one. I'm
From
not sure.
Menachem Creditor.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, no, it's a different one because that one did not mention Zelensky.
okay, I can send it to you in case you want.
Okay, you send it to me. You send yours, I'll send you the one that I have.
Sure, perfect.
I have a message in direct that asking to show the picture again. I'll show it briefly. And you can see all of the faces I covered because I cannot show you the faces of the soldiers. It's not safe. So, but that's the picture.
So I'm curious. Given
Yes.
given what the Jewish community is doing, how do you, as a spiritual leader, feel about what's going on from the other side with the Russian Orthodox Church, of effectively acting as a condoning what Putin is doing?
Yeah, what can I say? As I said, I was born in Russia. I'm a citizen of Russia. I know that culture from within, and the Russian church is just, I think they lost their way to God because they got so entangled with the government and with money and with all of that. So it's a real shame. I know wonderful Christian colleagues from Ukraine that they have nothing to do with the Moscow Patriarchate. And there is a kind of now the attempts to kind of to separate that and just to separate Ukrainian Orthodox Church from Russian Orthodox Church. It's a whole complicated process. Spiritual leaders are not saints. We all make mistakes, and I don't know how a priest or rabbi or anyone else can encourage people to go to war or to attack another country and proclaim that this is a holy war. But apparently it's not a new idea in our history, and that's the first time that the wars in the name of religion happened. So nothing is new under the heaven. Are there any other questions?
You mentioned that you have contacts all around the world who are helping. Are there any contacts that you have in Russia, and how do those people feel about the war?
Yeah, first of all, I have my parents in Russia, my own parents. My partner's Victor's parents are in Kiev, but my parents are in Russia, so I talk to them. And there are people in Russia who are against the war. There are people in Russia who are totally for the war. I would say the majority are supporting the war and President Putin and all of that, and it's very unfortunate. But we also need to remember that Putin have been president for more than 20 years already, more than half of my life. It's one and the same president. And the brainwashing of people, it didn't start, February 24th. It's been done for decades of people being really, there was a lot of propaganda about the war, that Russia has a right to wage the war, that it's a holy nation, that it's a nation that liberated world from Nazism. That's a big part of Russian culture. And it was very intense. It was everywhere, and people constantly, they were reminded that this is our, meaning of life, to save world from Nazis. And then they said, okay, now we declare that Ukraine are Nazis and let's liberate the world from them. And then people, they sincerely believe that they're fighting Nazis, despite having Jewish president, despite anything, Jewish community, whatever, they don't care. They do believe that these are Nazis. So from that perspective, they absolutely support the war. A majority of people in Russia support the war. But not everyone. Obviously, I also have friends from Russia who support Ukraine. Unfortunately, it's very hard to support Ukraine from within the Russia. So all of that people, they left at some point and they're elsewhere in the world. And they also do a lot of amazing things, donate money. I have a group of friends who collaborated and they bought several first aid first responders, first aid cars, the ambulances, right? They sent it to Ukraine. So Russian people are doing a lot of good work. It's just a very small amount of people, unfortunately. Okay. And maybe comments or something? I'm open for a discussion.
So I'm going to ask another question. I'm sorry, not a lot of people are speaking. So, so one of the things that's going on right now in the United States, as you may know, is that there's been a increase in anti-Semitism, particularly from the Black community. There have been a lot of things that have been in the news, certainly. And although people like Kanye West may be outliers, nevertheless, there is a large segment of the Black community which is joining in anti-Semitic thoughts. This has been very disheartening for Jews in America, particularly because they view themselves as having been on the front lines of civil rights during the 1960s, when issues of civil rights was very much at the center of American politics. So now, with that example being the case, as a spiritual leader, how do you advise Jews who may have felt either A, that they are coming from a history where there was anti-Semitism within a country that is now benefiting from their help, or for a future in which they will have been viewed as helping a country to fight off an oppressor, but may wind up ultimately returning to a situation in which they are mistreated by the overall population. Does that make sense? What I'm
Not
asking?
sure.
Meaning that to the extent that there was past anti-Semitism in Ukraine vis-a-vis Jews, Jews are now helping to help with Ukrainian independence, right? In the future, if Ukraine, God willing, is able to remain independent, if there is no more war, are you concerned that there will be a return of that anti-Semitism once the war is over?
I do not see a reason for the return of anti-Semitism. Like there was no anti-Semitism before the war. Why would it return?
Well, what was there no anti-Semitism? I mean, clearly, many of us have relatives who left Ukraine because there were various instances of pogroms and other things that did occur. So I don't think that it would be correct to say that there was no anti-Semitism.
But that was 100 years ago.
Right,
I didn't
correct.
believe, like it's not tied to the war, you know.
No, right, correct.
In any country, there can be a rise of anti-Semitism. Like in France, was there anti-Semitism in France? Terrible. In Germany, like, do we look at Germany this way? What if like tomorrow Germany will become anti-Semitic country? So I don't really see the connection necessarily to the war. So I did not, you know, I'm 38 years old. I did not see that period of time that was 100 years ago of like pogroms. Like pogroms happened literally 100 years ago, like in 1910s. What can I say? Can I predict the future? I can't. I can tell you that one of the goals of my work is also strengthening our kind of Jewish presence in there. So everyone knows that I'm a Jew, and everyone knows that the support that they get is from Jewish community. You know, all of the soldiers, they know that I'm a rabbi. Like all of volunteers, they know that. I make it very clear because I want people to know that this is what Jews do. And it's good for our reputation. And you know, and if it's from Israel, I also make sure that they know that it's from Israel. Am I afraid that it will become an anti-Semitic country one day? Any country can become an anti-Semitic country one day. Does it make sense what I said?
No, it definitely does make sense. I mean, as I said, you know, with the lessons that we have learned is that it doesn't take a lot for a country to find a scapegoat within its borders for problems that they have. And it seems as though Jews are oftentimes in a situation where they're one of the first people to run to help, but also one of the first people who are then blamed later on for some calamity that comes up. So you're correct. It's not specific to Ukraine. It's true for anyone, but I wasn't sure whether or not there's a lingering concern from among Ukraine's Jewish community that their actions will be counterproductive in the long run. There's not that.
I don't know an example of history when Jews would run to help anyone and then they would turn against them.
Yeah, I'm thinking certainly of Germany, in which many Jews served in World War I as German soldiers fighting for Germany.
Yeah, but they were like individuals. It wasn't like a help of Jewish community in any shape or form.
Right. Okay. Maybe so. Yeah.
And we never were so powerful to help anyone, actually. That's a unique time in the history when we actually have power to help. We have connections. As I said, this is the beauty of Jewish community, of how many people I know and how much we trust each other. This is absolutely crucial, that the way we were able to collaborate so successfully and resolve so many problems and save so many people is because we trust each other. Like when I get connected with, like, as a Jew to another Jew from another country we never met before, but we trust each other because I'm Jew and you're a Jew, and we're working together, and there is like complete trust and transparency and all of that. And I don't know, I don't think we ever had this kind of privilege in our life to be that strong as we are now. And partially, of course, because we have Israel, I think that's important too. And also because we are relatively, you know, for the past 30 years, I would say, we're relatively doing good. It's a very short time of, like, in the history scale, it's very short, but like in most of the countries, we are pretty safe. You know, we are usually middle class, you know, usually a little bit more. We're not that poor. Like Jews of Ukraine, they're not poor, you know, compared to like relative.
Before the war started, what percentage of the population was Jewish in Ukraine?
We don't know. It's very hard to, we don't know. It's very, very hard to count because like the way it is counted, this kind of statistics in United States is largely through the communities of like how many synagogues are there, how many members of the synagogues, how many people are buried at the Jewish cemeteries, how many people belong to all kinds of, you know, social help, you know, I don't know, JDC, all kinds of organizations, things like that. So this is how we estimate in United States, for example. In Ukraine, there is no way to do that because most of the people, they don't go to synagogues. They don't belong to any like organized network that could like really count them. So I don't know, but I would say hundreds of thousands. Some, I would say for Russia, the most optimistic number was like up to 1 million Jews at some point. So we can estimate Ukraine, a few 100,000 overall. But nobody knows, especially because when there is a census, Jews typically do not want to mention that they're Jews. So the reasons of security and constant lingering fear that there will be anti-Semitism again. But I do think that this fear is not only for Ukraine, it's for every country, because you never know what's going to happen. Okay, so if you don't have questions, let me tell you a little bit more, just a couple of words about the Jewish communities and, you know, how they help. And just as I mentioned, what was specifically very helpful is that we have a lot of trust between each other, and that we kind of, I think we respond really like with all our hearts to like this kind of persecutions. And that's why so many people just like really from the first days of the war really get together to do all of those things. And as all of that is done through the phone, like I don't need to meet anyone actually in person, but if anything happens and I need a specific, some kind of a help, or some person needs to go, I don't know, to Czech Republic. I have friends in Czech Republic, like students with whom I used to study in one of the universities in Europe. If someone would want to go to Brazil, I know to whom to reach out because I know a rabbi from Brazil. You see, like we're everywhere in the world. And that's so amazing. I did not realize that before. I did not know what treasure we have. And these people, they're so dedicated and so selfless. In the beginning of the war, I know many people found it very like uncomfortable to talk about what's going on in Ukraine as genocide, because people don't want to compare it to Holocaust, right? And especially because of the history of Holocaust in Ukraine, and it's felt very controversial. Right now, it's like 10 months of the war, we clearly see that it's a genocide. It's like, I don't think there's any question about that anymore, because it's specifically targeted against a specific population, and Russia wants them to be exterminated. They want Ukrainians to exist. They want Ukrainian language to exist, Ukrainian culture, anything. So it's like a very clear war against a specific, nationality. And I think that's just like, it means a lot. It means a lot to us. And we want to stop it, and we want to prevent it, and we want to help it, because many of us remember in our history how nobody helped us when we were dying in Holocaust. And we were saying, what were these people doing? Why they did not interfere? Why they didn't do anything? They knew what was happening, but they did not help. So now it's our turn. It's our chance, right? We don't want to be those people who didn't do anything. We don't want to be like them. We want to be good people, and we want to save as many lives as we can. And as the Talmud says, whoever saved one life saved the entire world. I think it's very deep in our values and in our culture to help people in this absolutely terrifying circumstances. And as I said, our prayer, our spiritual life, I think it prepared a lot of us for this difficult times, because we remember, even though I don't remember anti-Semitism to the way that like maybe your parents experienced it, in 20th century, but the historic memory is there, and we remember what it felt like, and that's why we want to help. And I'm just very grateful to know all of those people. And we, again, when we work together, there are Jews, there are non-Jews, we are all equal in that, and we all take our part, and we all support each other. But I'm, of course, especially proud of my Jewish people who are so selflessly dedicated to do from little thing to big things. We have volunteers who do, small things. I don't know, open their houses for refugees. And it's actually not so small, but like anyone can do it. Well, I have a friend of a friend who's a Jewish young girl, and she raised, I would say, $800,000 by today on her own. And she's a young Jewish girl. She could have had like completely different life. Like, she's from Ukraine, but she, that's what she did. She could have just enjoyed her life and be happy. But she dedicated all her time and effort to that. So people can do from little thing to like, there's no like end to what people can do. So a lot of people are feeling kind of helpless. They know what to do, don't know how to help. Like, we really want to help, but don't know like how to do that. So Jewish community is very, very efficient on that, because we can speak directly from a person to person. I speak directly for people who are in Ukraine right now. I know everything that is going on there. directly from them. I don't even need to read the news because I have all the first-hand information. But like, think about it. Now you know me, so you're also connected to that. It's not so far away, right? It's just like that. Like, I just came to you. Now you can have like all the information that you want. This was pretty easy, right? And that's the strength and beauty of our community. I think we're like at the end of our time. I just wanted to thank you, everyone who came today.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And I'll send the information that you requested. And thank you so much for giving me a chance to talk to them.
Thank you so much for your generosity with us and being, making yourself available. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Just remember that I'm here and you can reach out to me. I will share my email also if anyone has questions or whatever questions. I'm here. Remember that though we are in different countries, we're like modern technologies. There is no space between us. We can connect like that.
No boundaries.
No boundaries.
But the war is about boundaries, which is crazy.
It is. But as I said, it's like, it can be very depressing and very daunting, and it's hard. But also, when you see these amazing people, kind people who are doing so much, who are not afraid of anything, who are supporting each other, who are praying together, who are laughing together, even in the time of war, then, you know, it gives a lot of meaning to life, I would say.
That's right. Yeah, the hope that comes from grief and sorrow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alisa.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and have a wonderful day, everyone, and super early, very early Shabbat Shalom.
Yes. Why not?
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.